Now, as it is May even, I suppose one of the strongest dates in the calendar year, in the old calendar, when the older people, farmers especially, lived possibly in fear of tonight and tomorrow morning in up to probably 30 years ago. So Dr. Mannix Joyce here in front of me, well-known historian, correspondent, and Patsy McCann beside him. So we'll hear from those two mature people about Pisheogs and the beliefs and the happenings in their areas of other days.
Is this on?
Sure, yeah.
No, you've often heard the term the hot seat. Well, I find myself in the hot seat in two senses of the word now, here. Anyway, fires were very much associated with May Eve or Oiche Bealtaine. This is Oiche Bealtaine. Oh, yeah. And there were two great feasts in very ancient Ireland. That time they were in months, and they hadn't January, February, March, or any kind of divisions like those. But the year was divided in two, and two great feasts divided the year. One was Samhain, which was the 1st of November. The other was Bealtaine, the 1st of May. And some of you who may have read any of the stories of the Fianna Finn McCool will remember how during the period from Samhain to Bealtaine, that was through the winter from 1st November to May, they spent the time storytelling and so on indoors. And from Bealtaine to Samhain, then which took in the fine part of the year, they were out hunting. And there is one famous story in the Fianna cycle, or cycle of stories, and it's called An Bhríon Chairin, the fairy palace of the quicken trees, a famous story. And the beginning of that story is at Knockfearne, when Finn and his Fianna were out hunting on the slopes of Knockfearne, and a character called Meach, I don't know how many of you have read the story, approached them and invited them to his wonderful palace that was down somewhere near Palace Kenry direction. And they went in. It was a marvellous place, but once he got them inside, they found they were enchanted. They couldn't leave the chairs, or they were stuck to the ground and so on. But anyway, that, as I say, the year was divided by these two great feasts, Bealtaine and Samhain. Samhain was the more famous. Then, a little later, two further feasts were introduced to divide the year in four. And one of those is associated with Knockfearne, Lunacy, the festival of Lunacy on the 1st of August. And the other one, you'd never hear the name, oddly enough, I don't know why. It didn't survive like Bealtaine, Samhain and Lunacy. It was called Imbolg, and that was at the 1st of February. But anyway, tonight is the eve of the great feast of Bealtaine. And the end of that word, the tinna, of course, is a fire. And the traditions regarding Bealtaine were introduced by the Celts who came here to Ireland. Well, it started about 500 BC, that's 2,500 years ago. And they were spread all over Central Europe, what is now France, Northern Italy, parts of Germany, Belgium, and Switzerland. That was the Celtic land, but they came here to Ireland and they brought those customs with them. And the celebration of Bealtaine was one of them. And to celebrate it, they lit a huge fire, or a number of fires. And one of the things they did was to drive cattle between two fires, that have two fires for that special purpose, apart from maybe a huge big fire. And they believed that the cattle that were driven through between those two fires would be protected against disease. Now, Bealtaine, or May Day, was also the day on which they let the cattle out to graze. There were no ditches or fences between fields that time, and the cattle would be left up the side of hills where there'd be rough grazing, or maybe here in Knockfearne and so on. But that was Bealtaine quite important. And of course it was a pagan feast and was being celebrated long before Christianity came to Ireland. But like, it's an interesting thing that even though Christianity came 1500 years ago or so to Ireland, that so much of Bealtaine survived down along the centuries, so much of the pagan part of that feast. And I suppose the thing people most associated with it is the working of Pisheogs. And I'd imagine that nearly everybody here heard of Pisheogs, and the older among us will remember the steps that were taken to counteract the powers of Pisheogs. I remember when I was young, and special holy water was blessed for May Eve. We call it May water, and you'd be sent off to the church with your bottle and fill a bottle of holy water, the May water, and your duty then would be to go into every field belonging to your family and sprinkle some holy water in the field, sprinkle it on all the animals in the cow house and so on. And everybody, as far as I remember, did sprinkle holy water on May Eve, but the holy water is blessed no longer. I don't know whether it is that nobody practices Pisheogs, but they were being practiced anyway. Whatever the result was, I don't know, but I remember one time hearing a sermon in a local church, that maybe 35 years ago, a priest, and he condemning putting eggs in hay and things like that went on. And not alone was the sermon given in that church, but it was given in quite a number of churches in the area, so people must have been worried about it. But the thing was that some people believed that by practicing these Pisheogs, it's an Irish word, Pisheog, charm, magic charm, that they'd be able to attract to themselves some of the produce of their neighbours' industry. For example, you'd hear of a case where somebody has worked Pisheogs against a family, and the cows belonging to that family would only produce a trickle of milk, and some other person down the road a bit, they might have, the buckets might be overflowing with the milk from their cows, and the belief was that that person had worked Pisheog and had attracted the produce from the other person. And it was very prevalent in the case of butter making. That was before the era of creameries, and butter was made at home in the dairies. And stories were told how a woman, usually for some reason or other, was blamed for working the Pisheogs, but she had to work Pisheogs against some neighbouring farmer, and they could be churning all day long, and they couldn't make a bit of butter. And the person who had worked the Pisheogs, the churn would be full of butter. But these are the kind of stories that circulated, and people felt they were very vulnerable, anybody with cows or, making butter. And to, I suppose, put their mind at ease and to give them the kind of consolation of believing there was a stronger power, the holy water was blessed for that occasion. But it was believed that, it was wrong to take anything out of a house on May Eve. May Eve, Oiche Bealtaine, was more notorious than May Day itself. It was on May Eve most things were worked. Between sunset on May Eve and sunrise on May Day. Now, to take fire out of a house, if somebody came in to light his pipe, he'd be immediately under suspicion that if he came in on May Eve to do it, that he wanted to attract some of their produce from the place. And if he came in to light his pipe, he'd be allowed lighted, but he'd have to sit down and smoke it out inside. Or, at that time there weren't boxes of matches and things to be got as easily as they are got. They weren't there at all. And if one person's fire went out, they'd come to a neighbour and get a sod of turf and take it. But not on May Eve, you wouldn't get it. Or if a person came into a dairy while butter was being made on May Eve, again suspicion would fall on them. And the remedy for that was that they'd have to take a hand at the churning. But people lived in fear, especially country people who had cows and so on. Another thing then was, it was believed that by scraping off the dew of the grass of a neighbour's fields, you could again profit by doing it yourself. And the person doing that would go out with a spancel or a rope and draw it over the dew on the grass, and by doing so would attract away from the owner of that field the produce of his industry. And I heard a story a couple of years ago about some number of men who were going to a fair from Athlacka. They were going to a fair, I think, in Mitchelstown, and somewhere near Labamalaga. I don't know if any of you know where Labamalaga is. It's just on the Cork-Limerick border, between Kilfinnan and Ballyland, between Kilfinnan and Mitchelstown off the road. In the direction of Ballyland, there's an old church ruin there. There's a famous monastery, St. Muliga's monastery. Labamalaga means the bed or the grave of Malaga. But anyway, when they were passing by or near Labamalaga, they were surprised and rather frightened to see a woman inside at that very early hour of the morning when they were going to the fair with a rope, and she drawing it across the dew in the field. So anyway, the things were, you know, Pisheogs were attempted anyway up to, you know, quite recently, and people believed that other people profited by doing it, and people, the victims, believed that they had suffered as a result. So that is one of the things mainly associated with Meath. There are various other things, and I have talking about Sound and Bealtaine, there is a phrase in Irish, Scéal ó Hain go Bealtaine, a story from Sound to Bealtaine. It means a long-winded story. So I'll finish now because I don't want my story to be a Scéal ó Hain go Bealtaine.
Thanks, Dr. Mannix.